I'd like to introduce Mike Lashmet, who is the Snow and Ice Program Engineer for the New York State Department of Transportation. I'd like to thank Mike and his colleagues who have worked on this presentation and have worked with us for the last 2 winters on the tests of the road systems, which Mike is going to talk about. Bob Winans is here and a few others. Thank you all. Take it away.
Good morning. My name is Mike Lashmet. I am the Snow and Ice Program Engineer for the State Department of Transportation. I'm down in Albany, New York. And today I just want to spend a few minutes to go over our salt use pilot that we've been conducting over the last couple of years. One of the things that President Dove mentioned in her opening comments, and also Mr. Janeway, about the weather up here. It has been getting colder over the last couple of years, and freezing rain is a big problem up in this area. So those are just some of the challenges we face as a department in trying to maintain safe roads, but while also looking at stewardship for the environment and try to be as environmentally conscious as we can in providing safe roads for the traveling public. Which up there are I using? Oh, there we go. Inside there. Okay. Yep, Mark, you got it. The Department of Transportation, we partnered with ATPAction.org and Paul Smith's College to start this salt use pilot up here in the Adirondacks. To take a look at what our practices are and ways to help reduce the application of salt into the environment. We just completed our 2nd year. It was the winters of 2012-13 and 2013-14. And this just kind of shows our commitment and partnership with the 2 groups, and to work with them and work with our folks to try to have positive salt reduction results. And this presentation here will show some of those accomplishments over the past couple of winters. Snow and ice control goals that the department has. We're mandated under New York State highway law to provide maintenance of the state highways, including snow and ice control. And it's our mandate to provide reasonable passage and movements of vehicles over the highway system. And our snow and ice guidelines do reflect that, and we do work to prevent the formation of hardpack and icing on pavement, and while also maintaining safe and passable highways for as much of the time as possible as we can. We're not going to have, there's going to be snow and ice accumulating on the highways, but as long as we're working to prevent that from bonding and to keep the highways relatively safe, we do that as best we can, while also keeping the environment in mind as we're conducting our operations. In 2012, we modified our snow and ice guidelines in reducing our salt application rates. So statewide, what we did for snow events, we reduced our initial application rates by 10% across the board. Okay, so that was one step we've taken. And we've also expanded the use of pre-storm anti-icing operations using liquids. We're expanding the use of salt brine in advance of a storm so that we can get the brine and the salt on the road, and then once the storm hits, we can come by with a follow-up application rate of salt instead of starting with our higher initial application rate of salt. So that's another area where we've improved our operations. Types of materials that we use, primarily we do use salt. Okay, it's relatively inexpensive, although the prices did skyrocket this coming year with the OGS contract. We also use salt treated with magnesium chloride. That allows the salt to perform a lot better in colder temperatures. We can use it at reduced application rates. And Essex County, our DOT facility in Essex County, has gone exclusively to treated salt now because of the added benefits that we've seen in its performance. For liquids, which we use for pre-wetting the salt before it hits the road, is salt brine. Salt brine we also use for direct application on the pavements. But for pre-wetting salt, calcium chloride is used, magnesium chloride is used, and also magnesium chloride with agricultural additives is also utilized for pre-wetting the salt. And again, that coats the salt, allows it to work quicker and work better at a lower application rate. We do occasionally use abrasives or sand. We've got away from using sand because of the negative environmental impacts. There are impacts with sand getting into the streams, affecting the spawning areas for fish, causing, as you can see, this is an aerial view of English Brook, I believe it is, of Lake George, and you can see how the negative impact with sand getting down into the lake. Sand is not effective for higher traffic speeds. Heavier applications are needed, and the salt needs to be mixed with, the sand needs to be mixed with salt so that the salt doesn't freeze up rock hard in the storage facility. So in order for the salt to maintain its, so it doesn't freeze up, we have to mix salt in there. So we're still putting down higher application rates of sand with also a higher amount of salt within that sand. Unfortunately, sand does not melt ice, so it does promote hard pack conditions on the road, which require higher amounts of salt to burn that off. The pilot beats, this map shows all the plow beats, all up in the Adirondack Park. All those different colors are individual snow plow beats. We identified 4 pilot beats in which we've, for this study. One is down Route 8 in Hamilton County, Route 3 in Franklin County, Route 86 coming out of Lake Placid, and Route 73 along the Cascade Lakes corridor. All right, so I mentioned earlier some of the challenges that we face in trying to maintain safe highways in the winter and also being good for the environment. But the demands and effects of snow and ice control are different every winter. You may remember the winter of 2011. That was basically a half winter for us. There was hardly any snow, hardly any winter precipitation. Last winter we got clobbered. Okay, it was a very, very bad winter. We're out there, quite often treating the highway pavements. So the total use of salt or any other snow and ice control materials are driven by the coldness of the pavement, the amount and type of precipitation, be it just light fluffy snow, heavy wet snow, freezing rain, whatever the case may be, and the outdoor temperature. This is a map, a winter severity map of the United States, and this was put together through a research group that New York State is a part of called Clear Roads. Clear Roads is a pooled fund with 29 member states, and Dave Weeder here from Colorado DOT, he's the chairman of that committee right now. As I mentioned, New York State is a member of this. And what we did is we put together a research study to develop a winter severity map across the United States. So the scale on the side here is like down south. You really don't get much. You can see down we have no member states down here, so we can't go to warm places for these meetings. But down here at the bottom of the scale, where it's white and pink, those are the worst winter severity areas in the country. And they take into account the amount of snow, the amount of freezing rain, temperature, blowing snow, all sorts of things. This is one map that compiles all that information. So if you look at the most severe winter weather in the country, you can see out here in Colorado, you got some white areas, and up in the high peaks of the Rockies. Take a look right there. Right there is Saranac Lake. Okay, so Saranac Lake, Hamilton County, up here in the Adirondacks, the reds and the whites and the pinks. New York State has some of the worst weather in terms of winter severity in the country. So taking some National Weather Service report data from 2011 to now, the last 3 winters, Saranac Lake, for example, the average temperature has been going down over the last 3 winters during our pilot. And the snow has been increasing. This is the Indian Lake prediction. Okay, so we've been seeing colder temperatures and more precipitation, winter precipitation. talk a little bit about the melting power of salt. Salt is not very effective in the cold temperatures. If you look up here at temperature of roughly 30 degrees, this shows that 1 pound of salt will melt 45 pounds of ice. Okay? You drop 5 degrees down to 25 degrees, 1 pound of salt will only melt 15 pounds of ice. And it gets worse as it gets colder. All right? So with the colder temperatures that we've been experiencing, although we're working hard to maintain lower application rates and control the salt use going out, with the lower temperatures and higher precipitation, more material is needed. So what we did is to kind of equalize a normal winter to what we experienced over the last several years. We developed a relative severity equation here. So from 2008 through 2013-14 season, we developed an index factor which looked at the National Weather Service snowfall data, and we divided that by a temperature factor. The temperature factor is the amount of ice melted over the amount of salt needed to melt that ice at average winter temperatures. So what we did is taking that information. This is the Saranac Lake area, Franklin County. The average temperature is the blue, so you can see, here's 2011 to kind of bring that up, but you can see the temperature was declining, getting colder. The average snowfall, you can see the amount of snowfall here. And that is increasing. That is this kind of a grayish color, whitish. The colors really don't do too well on this screen here. But basically, using that equation with winter severity, you can see at least the last 3 seasons, when you kind of equalize it out, you can see the severity of the winters have been increasing. Okay? You can see that moving up. Now, my next batch of slides, I'm not going to go through all of them in the interest of time. But I'm just going to go through one of them here, and then you can look at the rest of them. I'll flip through them, but you can look at the rest of them on the ATPAction.org website. But Franklin County, this here shows from 2007 through this past season, the amount of plain salt we use, which is the red, the pre-wet salt, where we treat the salt before it comes out of the truck, and treated salt, which is purple, and then sand use, which is the yellow. So you can see over the last bunch of winters, the salt use has actually been coming down a bit, okay? But these last couple winters with that increased severity, the actual amount of salt that's gone out has increased a little bit over the last few years. And this is for the entire shop in Franklin County, Pasico Lake, Lake Clear. Right, Rob? Lake Clear? This is at Lake Clear, where all the beats for that area come out of, and this is the specific beat on Route 3, the amount of material that was used. So you can see the material has gone up a little bit over the last few years, but you have to keep in mind the severity of the winters that we've been experiencing over the last couple of years. So now if you look at the actual index use with the severity, you can see over the last few years, that's the light blue. You can see that when you equalize it, it's actually been coming down. So the amount of salt we've been doing in terms of application relative to the winter has been coming down over the last several years during the pilot. So we think that's good. It shows how closely our supervisors are monitoring the salt applications out on the highway system, and with the challenges of the colder winter, we're just trying the best we can to control the salt use, so we only put out as much as needed. Okay, so I'm just going to flip through these, but this is Route 8, Pasico, and Lake Placid area, Route 86, all right, and then Route 73 out of Keene. That's their data there. So like I said, you can look at that on the website. So anyway, one of the successes here is the material application rates have ranged between 194 to 225 pounds per lane mile. Okay, that's for the temperatures we've been experiencing, that's well within and actually a little lower than what our application rates are in our snow and ice guidelines. For the lower temperatures, around the 20-degree area, our guidelines actually say 250 pounds per lane mile is what we should be using. But as you can see, with the based on our data that we've collected, we've come way down below that, and we're still maintaining the road safely. Some of the tactics that we're using for the Adirondack pilot and in the Adirondacks, and actually statewide for many cases, is the use of underbelly scrapers on our plow trucks. Our plow trucks usually have a front plow and a right wing. If you're out on the interstate, you might see two wings on the plow. But we also have these underbelly scrapers. And what these are doing is the first plow, it's kind of like a double-edged razor when you're shaving. The first plow takes off the majority of the material, and this underbelly plow will be like that second blade coming through to get anything that the first blade, plow blade, has missed. In Franklin County, there are 20 plow trucks in that county, and we have 5 of those trucks with an underbelly scraper. And as we replace trucks, get new trucks into the fleet, we're getting more and more with the underbelly scrapers on there. The underbelly scrapers, we have a lot of good experience with them, and when we lower those application rates, okay, as low as we can go, we're probably right down at the limit as to where the salt remains effective to when it becomes very ineffective. And we've been noticing with the lower application rates that hard pack had been starting to form in some areas, and those underbody scrapers takes it right up. So instead of coming down and putting a bunch of more salt on there to try to melt it away or burn it off, those underbelly scrapers are actually doing a good job and kind of hitting that hard pack right as it's starting to form to keep it off the road. We're going to expand the use of AVL, which is automatic vehicle location systems, across the state. We've been using them up here in the Adirondacks. The cell coverage, which is what we need to transmit the data, is kind of spotty, so we're not getting the full benefit of the AVL use up here. But statewide, we're expanding the use of AVL. And what that can do is provide data as to how much material we're putting out, where the trucks are, how fast they're going, that kind of information that the managers can use to make sure that if someone's putting out a much higher application rate that they're told to do or should have done, they can follow up with that driver, or maybe there was a situation that they need a higher application rate. So that's just another step to try to monitor our salt use as much as possible. We're increasing the operation of pre-storm anti-icing. That's where we put the liquids down on the pavement before the storm actually hits. We can't do that for every storm. If it's going to rain ahead of time, that's kind of a waste of putting material out. If it's too cold, you might not be able to put the liquids down. And one of the projects we worked on recently is purchasing a bunch of brine makers to be used across the state. We purchased, or are purchasing now, having installed 36 brine makers across the state in addition to the few that we already had. And again, that, as I mentioned earlier, that allows the initial reduction in initial application rate of salt when the plow trucks actually come out to attack the storm. In the Adirondacks, specifically in our Region 1, we have a brine maker going into the Severity shop and one at Raybrook. And in Region 7, we have one in Plattsburgh, Malone, and Messina. We can't put salt brine makers everywhere because you need a real good water source, and some of our locations are on wells that just don't have the recovery. So we try to use locations that have a municipal water system. So if we have, brine makers in these locations, we can also always install a couple of storage tanks in our remote locations, produce the brine at one of these locations and tank it over and have it available at a location that doesn't have a brine maker. Some of the things we tried but we're discontinuing as a result of this pilot is the Squeegee Blade. Squeegee Blade is a good idea. Kind of like what I described with the underbelly blade. You got the extra blade here. You got the cutting edge right here on the front of the plow. This is a heavy rubber blade that kind of comes down and squeegees off behind that first blade. Problem we saw with that is not compatible with our trucks. When the blade goes back and forth, it hits the framework of our truck and damages this part of the blade. It also didn't perform as well as we thought it would in terms of squeegeeing off behind, so we discontinued that use. That was one of the things we were going to try out here. We tested it out actually in the middle part of the state. Before we brought it up here, found it didn't really work all that well. Another system that we tried is a maintenance decision support system. We tried that at several locations across New York State. And basically what that does is it's supposed to take into account the weather forecasting, the type of material we're using, what our snow and ice guidelines are, information from road weather information system. All that data gets put into the system, and then it basically gives us recommendations. It's kind of hard to see, but those three things there are little plow trucks. Okay, so as the storm was coming in, the system will tell us, okay, at a certain time, the plow truck should go out with a certain amount of application of salt or whatever it is, and then 2 hours later do the same thing or at a reduced rate or whatever. So it'll give you those recommendations on when to start, when to stop. Maybe you don't have to apply material, just plow. It's supposed to result in salt reduction. And the pilot areas down in the western and the southern part of the state that we tried this, we really didn't see much of a salt savings that the system recommended because our application rates were already low enough that, if that told us to cut it even in half or even more, the salt wouldn't be effective. So that really didn't show us the savings because we're already, managing our salt as well as we can. So there's no sense in investing any more into that system. Salt storage improvements. We've made salt storage improvements over the years, and everything that we have in terms of salt is kept under cover. This is the relatively new shed down in Keene. This is what it used to look like. Okay, and that would only hold about 150 tons of salt. You can see it, spills out here into the environment, so that wasn't a good thing. So we built this facility down in Keene. It's a relatively new one in Severance. And I'm sure there's other salt dome improvements that have been made at various locations. And that's one of the key things is, point sources are a problem. We don't know how much that contributes, but if you have an open pile of salt just sitting out in the environment and over the summertime, that's just constantly getting rained on and washing into the system, so into the environment. So if there's any uncovered salt piles out there in the towns or the counties or whatever, or at a like a shopping mall or something, there might be a pile of salt plopped down there for their use. That kind of stuff needs to be covered, and that's where some improvements can be made beyond DOT, but we have everything under cover. So anyway, our salt reduction tactics, kind of wrap it up here, is one of the things we did up here in the Adirondack specifically is to reduce the speeds of the plow trucks. Normally we go 30 to 25 miles an hour, but we reduce those speeds to 25 miles an hour. And the reason for that is as the salt comes out of the truck, it bounces a bit, and it bounces and scatters. So if we slow down the truck, the salt comes out, it reduces the bounce and scatter, and the majority of the salt stays on the road where it belongs, so it can be effective and anti-ice the pavement instead of bouncing off onto the shoulders and getting into the environment without being used. Again, the use of the belly scrapers. Expand the use of using magnesium chloride treated salt. As I mentioned, Essex County is exclusively using the mag chloride treated salt, and also for pre-wetting salt directly off our trucks. You can kind of see here, right here is what we call a saddle tank. It goes along the side of the truck, and in the saddle tank is where we would carry the magnesium chloride liquid. And then out of the back of the truck, when the salt comes out off the spinner, it gets sprayed at that point. We'll continue to use abrasives sparingly. the salt is ineffective, and we may use salt or sand on steep hill or intersection to try to keep a little bit of friction there so the cars can stop. Calibration verification every year. Our equipment, our spreader controllers for the trucks have to be calibrated. We make sure they're calibrated, so when the spreader is saying that we're putting out 115 pounds a lane mile, we're putting out 115 pounds per lane mile. All right, and we'll calibrate them during the season to make sure the trucks are still accurate. And we're doing some focused snow and ice trading. We do that statewide anyway, but up here at the Adirondacks, we're working a lot more with the supervisors and the operators to kind of stress the importance of the environmental sensitivity up here, and making sure that they're putting out just the right amount of snow and ice materials that are needed. Quality assurance by our supervisors and managers. One of the things we put up on each of our pilot beats are these warning signs, because we didn't know if by cutting down the salt, if that was going to really cause problems with the safety on the road. So those are still posted, I believe. But our supervisors and managers are going out and making sure that with the reduced amount of application we're putting out, that there aren't dangerous situations starting to pop up with hard pack and all that. So they're keeping good track of that. Continue to track the trends of our salt use, like I showed earlier with those charts. Again, monitor levels of service of the highway to make sure that vehicles can get through safely and reasonably. The tactics that have been successful, we're going to continue to expand them, not just on the pilot beats, but throughout the Adirondacks and as much as we can across the state. And of course, we'll continue working with ATPAction.org. Try to keep the lines of communication open and work with them on our tactics and other efforts that we're making to be good with the environment when it comes to salt use. New York State DOT is involved with a number of national level partnerships. The main one that we're with, as I mentioned, is Clear Roads. It's a research pooled fund for winter highway maintenance. We're also a member of the AASHTO Winter Maintenance Technical Service Program and the New York New England Maintenance Consortium.
You might want all the actors
Oh, American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. I did that right. Okay. Now with the Clear Roads, New York State DOT, its dues, if you want to call it that, is $25,000 a year. So every state contributes $25,000 into the pool fund with those 29 states. So now I've got a pool of money to do some research. So instead of New York DOT having its own research group, which we don't have anymore, we can't do research. And if we did, it would cost us a lot of money. So we throw $25,000 a year to this effort. And here's just a sampling of some of the research that's ongoing or has been done. Well, one of them was that map I showed earlier with the winter severity. This one here is one that I actually requested, and I'm the lead state representative for this project, is the performance of snow and ice materials on porous and permeable pavements. And the value of that research there is $185,000. Okay? And basically what that's looking at is there's some states that have problems with these new types of pavements that are out there and are finding that the snow and ice control materials aren't effective on them. So it's causing multiple applications of salt because of the type of pavement, for whatever reason, we don't know why, just requires a lot more snow and ice material on it. So the researchers taking samples of this type of pavement, doing lab tests on it to try to figure out what's happening. Establishing effective material application rates. There's $107,000 worth of research that we're getting for $25,000. Snow and ice control, environmental best management practices. Okay, those are the dollar amounts of the research. Snow plow route optimization. That's another one that we're going to be actively involved in. What's the best way to align our beats for our plow trucks to get them out so we're using the least amount of fuel, least amount of material. Also, the Pacific Northwest Snow Fighters, Clear Roads is kind of taken over that group. And what this group does is they look at all the different types of snow and ice chemicals that are out there, and they do lab tests, and then they approve certain materials. You know, you've heard of beet juice, and there's all sorts of names of different materials that are out there that are being used. Some are good and some aren't. So the Pacific Northwest Snow Fighters looks at them and say, nope, this stuff's no good, or nope, this stuff meets our strict criteria, and these are approved. New York State uses some of these, but we have even stricter chemical constituent requirements than the Pacific Northwest Snow Fighters do in some cases. So some products that are approved by Northwest Snow Fighters may not be approved here in New York because there might be some constituents that are a little too high. So the group is www.clearroads.org is the website if you feel that you want to take a look to see what other kind of work we're doing. But again, that's an outstanding group, and I mentioned Dave Weeder is the chairman of that now, and we just have, what, is the remainder of this year, Dave?
27 Mondays, my friend.
Okay, very good. So, and that's my contact information, so that pretty much completes my presentation. Time for questions, Lee? Or?
We have time for questions, so
okay.
I'm sure there are some.
Okay. Yes, ma'am?
Yes, I have a question about your salt storage.
Yeah.
You were showing a video about the old and the new ones.
Mm-hmm.
And you had stated that the salt storage does contribute to contaminating the aquifer and the water.
Sure.
When it gets, are you planning on replacing all of the old storage sheds through Clinton County as well?
Well, all of our salt up in Clinton County DOT's facilities should all be covered.
No.
Which ones aren't?
There's one in the town of Saranac that still has the old ones, and there's one in the town of Dannemora that still has the old ones. Those are
Well, they could be old, but they could still
they
be
don't have the
effective.
new sheds like you were saying.
No, right. Well, some of the older ones could still be functional. Okay, we're not going to replace everything, but some, we had some problems, like well, that one that I showed you in that picture was just way too small for our needs at that facility. So we built a larger one to store all that material. In the past, we had some problems with a few of our salt domes. They were starting to deteriorate or collapse or whatever. So we went through, replaced a lot of them with those kind of the canvas covered ones that you may have seen. But there's other older storage facilities out there that are still well maintained and still in good shape. So there's no need to really replace them as long as they're, everything's staying inside and keeping it out of the environment. But we don't have any uncovered salt piles sitting out there. Or we shouldn't. If there are, let me know. We'll take care of it. Okay, yes, sir.
You're talking about the ADL systems, and
Yep.
We do a contract with the state, doing their state roads.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to be in the future applied to towns that do contracts also?
Yeah, we've discussed that. I think we're going to get our trucks outfitted first with that because we don't know which system is the best yet. So we don't want to start saying, yeah, use this, but then that's not the right one to use.
Okay, because it's going to be a cost for the towns too, unless the state wants to help out.
Yeah, well, generally with the snow and ice contracts, there's certain costs like when your salaries for your employees increase, or there's an increase in salt price, there's adjustment sheets that you can do, and that could be one of the things that could be included there.
We might consider providing that.
I'm sorry?
We want to probably even provide it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, that brings me to the other question with the brine tanks also, because we're just doing just all salt. We have no capability with the brines at all for to apply it. Even on our newer vehicles that we've purchased in the last couple of years.
Yeah. You mean in terms of like having saddle tanks put on your trucks,
yeah,
or?
Yeah, all that in the storage facility for.
Yeah. Well.
I know it's all to do with the environment and stuff here.
Yeah. Now, one of the things you could try is instead of the plain salt, you can go to a treated salt. It's already pre-mixed for you, so you don't need the saddle tanks on your trucks.
Right.
It's a little more expensive, but you should be able to reduce your application rate, so it might kind of work out. Okay. Yes, sir.
Mike, I live adjacent to the Hamilton County test feed that you have down there in Paseco.
Yep.
I don't notice any difference. I think it's been just as well maintained as the other roads that the contract that you guys do. But it's in a really wide open, beautiful canopy area. Have you noticed any difference in that where the canopy is open as far as the trees go, and what about these other test sites?
What are you talking about? It's open so the sunlight gets in? Is that what you're saying? Yes. Well, sunlight is our friend in the wintertime, okay? And, you know, up here, you know, just the way the topography is and stuff, you got trees close to the road, a lot of times the sun can't come down to help, you know, warm up the pavement to melt the snow. So there are certain situations where when you don't get the sunlight, we have to be out there treating the pavement to prevent it from freezing up. If there was a way to get more sunlight into the roads, I'm not saying cut down all your trees, of course, but if there's a way to open that up a little bit to get the sunlight onto the roads, that would be a great benefit in terms of reducing the salt application.
I'm certainly not cut them all down. But
Right.
It's very clear anecdotally where we are, where Town of Pleasant is a contractor, Hamilton County is a contractor, to say the areas that have a more open canopy, besides being safer for the drivers and the wildlife and everything else, it clearly appears to be a longer stretches of better roads for a longer period of time.
Yep.
In all months, but it definitely is requires less application.
Absolutely. Yep. And then one of the test beats, the one through the Cascade Lakes area. That's like in a valley. It's a wind tunnel basically, and you know, it's just, you know, steep slopes on one side and everything. And our crews are out there almost daily, almost 24 hours. Just even if it's not snowing out, you get all the blowing snow and everything, and we just have to keep in there, you know, treating the roads to keep it safe. So it's, you know, one of the challenges that we have. Okay, yes, ma'am.
Just wondering what the current procedure is for addressing frozen culverts on the road. I know in the past I found lumps of salt in the spring.
Yeah, when we have frozen culverts like that, sometimes the maintenance forces will come out with calcium chloride. You know, they have them in bags or whatever, and we have to melt them out, or else, you know, if you get a freak rainstorm in the wintertime or something, it's just not going to function.
That's the only current method.
Generally, that's what you do. There may be some others, but generally, we'll use, you know, calcium chloride material.
They just pick it up anything that's left over.
What's that?
They should pick it up anything that has.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sir?
Yeah, you mentioned that you're doing research with the Clear Roads Group on areas of the country that have experimented with porous pavement, and they're having problems keeping the surfaces clear, and they're having to use higher levels of salt. The Lake George location, the county has used a lot less. It's an extremely open, sunny area, and that may have something to do with it.
That could be.
But where are the places where they're having problems and having to put more salt on?
Massachusetts is having problems.
And it's not really, the treatment we've had problem with is some of these new overlay treatments, Nova Chip.
Yeah, the Nova Chip problem.
It's not a fully porous pavement, it's the top
Yeah.
level that's more open, and you can trap moisture.
Right, and
So it's not a complete reconstruction.
Right.
and the Nova Chip that Bob mentioned is primarily why I requested that or put in this request for the research. What was happening down, it happened on a thruway out near Manchester, I believe, similar situation, but down in Greene County on Route, I think it was 23 or 23A, going up through the mountain, we have this new Nova Chip on there. Then in the wintertime, it was a beautiful sunny day, sub-freezing temperature, maybe it was 20 degrees or whatever, but not a cloud in the sky, and the pavement just became a slick sheet of ice.
Can you describe what a Nova Chip is?
Yeah, it's a thin overlay. It has
Open graded.
What's that?
It's an open graded aggregate, put down cold with emulsion, so it's about 3/4 of an inch thick.
Right.
It's not as smooth like a tennis court mix. It's open grade for friction.
Right, and it's a low-cost friction course, to overlay a road. And so what was happening is on these cold days, we would just like freeze over. You get out of your car, you slip, a car was going uphill and rolled over.
Black ice.
It's like black ice forming. So the research is going to try to figure out what's happening in that situation. So,
Okay, we have an opportunity here, which I think we will take. for a 10-minute or less break to get some coffee, visit the facilities. And anybody that